In 1978, a man went on a prime-time American dating show and won. He was funny on camera. The woman chose him. He had already been convicted of a violent sexual offense against a child. He was on parole at that moment, and he was still killing. This is the part of these three files that is genuinely difficult, and it is not the part you usually hear. These men were not invisible. A doctor reported one of them. A parole system was actively supervising another. A criminal record already existed on the third. In all three cases, something had been noticed, written down, and filed. They did not survive because nobody saw them. They survived because the systems around them repeatedly misread what they were looking at. 3 files. We are counting them down. Harold Shipman was a family doctor in Hyde, near Manchester, in the north of England. Full patient list, good reputation. He made home visits, and his elderly patients trusted him completely. For years, those patients had been dying at home. Quietly, often in the afternoon, often alone, and often shortly after a visit. Here is what is usually left out. Somebody noticed. In March 1998, a doctor at another practice in the same town, Linda Reynolds, telephoned the coroner. She had compared the numbers. Shipman was signing cremation forms at a rate her own much larger practice could not come close to. A local undertaker had raised the same concern. The coroner called the police. An investigation opened on the 24th of March. It closed on the 17th of April, 3.5 weeks later. The conclusion was that there was no substance to the concerns. Between that closure and Shipman's arrest, he killed 3 more people: Winifred Meller, Joan Malia, and Kathleen Grundy. Kathleen Grundy died on the 24th of June, 1998. She was 81. Days later, a will surfaced. Badly typed. It cut out her family and left almost everything to her doctor. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, was a solicitor. She had drafted her mother's real will herself. She knew this one was a forgery, and she went to the police. They exhumed Kathleen Grundy. She had died of a diamorphine overdose, and when investigators opened Shipman's patient records, they found he had gone back into them and rewritten them, adding symptoms his patients had never reported. He was convicted of 15 murders in January 2000, and a public inquiry later concluded he had killed at least 215 people. That same inquiry, in its second report, examined the March investigation directly. Its finding was that if the police and the coroner had moved with reasonable expedition, Shipman's last 3 victims would probably have been saved. Kathleen Grundy was one of those 3. The woman whose will finally exposed him was also the woman a working investigation would have saved. The second man on this list was not reported to anyone. He was being actively supervised. On the 13th of September, 1978, an episode of The Dating Game aired in the United States. Bachelor number 1 was a photographer named Rodney Alcala. 10 years earlier, Alcala had attacked an 8-year-old girl in Los Angeles. Her name was Tali Shapiro. She survived, and he was eventually convicted over that attack. At the time of that broadcast, he was on parole for offenses against children, and he was an active killer. Cheryl Bradshaw picked him, met him off set, and refused to go on the date. Something about him unsettled her. That is where the story is usually told as a near miss. The more uncomfortable fact is structural. A man with a conviction for a violent sexual offense against a child was under active state supervision and was booked as a romantic contestant on national television. Nothing in either system spoke to the other. What ended it was a 12-year-old girl named Robin Semso, who disappeared in June 1979 on her way to a dance class in Huntington Beach, California. Her friends had been approached by a man at the beach that day. They described him. An artist produced a composite sketch, and it went out on television. 5 days later, Alcala's parole officer telephoned the police. He had seen the sketch, and he recognized one of the men on his own caseload. The supervision system did eventually work. It worked because one officer watched the news, not because any record was cross-checked. After his arrest, detectives searched a storage locker Alcala kept in Seattle and found hundreds of photographs he had taken of people. Police did not release any of them publicly until 2010, 30 years later, hoping the people in them could be identified. This is worth being precise about because it is almost always told backwards. Those photographs did not catch him. They were found because he had already been caught. He was convicted of 7 murders in total in California and in New York, and died in prison in 2021. The man at number 1 had a criminal record too. His community made him a public figure anyway. Before any of what follows, John Wayne Gacy had already been convicted in Iowa of assaulting a teenage boy. He was sentenced to 10 years. He served considerably less and was paroled. He then moved back to Illinois, built a construction company outside Chicago, and became a civic fixture. He was a director of the local Polish Constitution Day parade. He performed at children's parties and at hospitals as a clown, in a costume he had designed himself. On the 6th of May, 1978, he was photographed shaking hands with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady of the United States. 7 months later, on the 11th of December, a 15-year-old boy named Robert Piest finished his shift at the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois. He told his mother he was going to speak to a contractor about a job that paid better, and that he would be back. He did not come back. His mother did not wait until morning. She went to the police that night, and people at the pharmacy identified the contractor he had left to meet. That is the hinge, not a profile and not a pattern assembled from years of missing young men. A mother who refused to wait, and a name given the same evening. Detectives ran it, and the record from Iowa came back. The first search of Gacy's house produced enough evidence to keep investigators on him. What followed was surveillance, further warrants, and only then the scale of the case. 33 known victims, almost all of them young men and teenage boys. Gacy was sentenced to death on the 13th of March, 1980, and executed in 1994. A doctor called the coroner about Shipman and was not believed in time. A parole system supervised Alcala for years and identified him only when one officer happened to watch the news. A conviction for assaulting a teenage boy sat in Gacy's file the whole time he was organizing the parade. None of these 3 men were hidden. The information existed in all 3 cases. It sat in a coroner's phone call, in a parole file, in a criminal record from another state. The information was institutional. The decisive act was personal. It was Angela Woodruff reading a will she knew was wrong. It was Robin Samso's friends describing a face well enough for a stranger to draw it. It was Robert Piest's mother walking into a police station the same night instead of the next morning. New files open every week. Some stay sealed. Subscribe and follow the archive for the next one.